the story of Jesus walking on water. I think the first thing, I don't know how many of you have this going through your brain right now. It might not be very many, but I'll say this anyways. There are a lot of very powerful and deep reasons why this story is in three Gospels, and I think we are limiting ourselves if we start thinking, well, I wonder if that really happened, or how would that actually work, or maybe the sea was really shallow and he was kind of walking onto reeds, or all of these analytical things that we might be thinking. I encourage you to go deeper with me into this story where even the wind and the sea obey the Son of God. For people in the ancient world, the sea and the wind were the very incarnation of chaos. The wind was invisible, unknowable. You can feel it, but you could not see it. It was an allegory for the Holy Spirit. The seas were mysterious. They were bottomless. Mysterious creatures dwelled within them. If you were living in Galilee and you were Jewish, the creation narrative that you would have in your mind begins with the winds and the seas. If you were to imagine a place where God wasn't, what you would imagine is being in the middle of the ocean, in the blackest, darkest night with no light. And below you is the roiling sea, and in the air is a great storm. For the ancient Hebrews, that was what the world was like before God came, before time began and God was. If there was a time when God wasn't, or if there was a time when God was not with this world, that's what they imagined. Not the vacuum of space, but rather being a tiny boat on a storm, surrounded by cold and darkness, with an endless sea below and endless chaos above. And then out of that chaos comes God, comes light. And this is where our creation story, our creation myth, separates wildly from almost every other culture, especially in this time in the ancient Near East. They diverge dramatically. For most other cultures, what happened was there was some kind of chaos event, and then a moment of great violence. A moment of great violence where the chaos was subdued, defeated, killed, torn apart. And out of that chaos came order, came a mighty warrior, and a military order over the earth. And to be a follower of that God meant to be a great warrior yourself, and to subdue and force others to submit to the will of your God and to your own will. That's what most people were used to in this culture in this time. But that's not what our story has happened. In our story, it's really chaotic. It's really dark. Light comes. And then things get more chaotic. God adds the fish in the sea. And the roiling seas now become a roiling sea filled with life. God adds the birds in the air. And now the great winds and the great storms are also filled with life. And birds and bugs and all kinds of critters that crawl, the creepy things that crawl on the earth, I think it says. And then there are animals and plants and many colors, and finally us. And we're not meant to kill and destroy the life that is on the earth. In fact, we don't start eating animals in the scriptures until after the flood, after Noah's flood. We're supposed to live and coexist with this rich tapestry of life that as it grows, it gets more and more chaotic. God actually invites the chaos of life, the chaos of love. To be a follower of the God and the people of Israel is actually to embrace the chaos of life and love it. to not subdue and destroy and force others to submit, but to open oneself to the life and the wonder of God as God continues to transform and enrich the world with new things. The one thing we were to do, I think, was to name it, to name all the creatures of the earth, and then to allow them to live and to flourish. I would submit to you that this is the kind of creation narrative our world needs. We're living in a time of chaos. When I started thinking about all of the things that I felt I needed to preach on this week, there's a lot of things to preach on this week. We're concluding the 22 days. We're working as a nation to reach reconciliation. There was an act of terrible violence that happened in the United States that affected some people. I have clergy friends that are preachers and teachers in Charleston. It's Father's Day on top of everything else. But I look at some of the terrible things that have happened throughout the course of our history and the course of our last week, and I can't help but see a parallel between some of the terrible things that have happened and forces of violence trying to do exactly what I was describing. It's sort of the mythology of empire, the mythology of great forces of violence, right? There's a temptation in the face of chaos, if you have great power, to force the chaos to submit. If you see the chaos of a culture that you don't understand, relationships that you don't understand, a people you don't understand, a lifestyle, a world, a creation filled with incredible different kinds of life. There's a temptation to force those things that we don't understand, the chaos of life and love, to submit to one worldview, to remove the chaos because it's scary. And look at the ways. Another wonderful thing that happened this week was the Pope unveiled a new encyclical. Did you hear about this? These are really important things. The papal encyclical. It happens only once every 2-3 years. The Pope will write this big document that's supposed to be his statement of faith, and it's a call to revolution on behalf of the poor and on behalf of our created order. He says that we're waging war against creation, and the poor will be the first people to be punished from our iniquity against the earth. I think about the difference between our culture in years past trying to force creation to submit. Dogs, you can stay because you can kind of live in our house. Wolves, we need to destroy. Gardens are okay. Cows are okay. Other wild creatures, swampland, rainforests, we need to lay waste to them to get them to submit to our created order that we envision things to be. We know that to be wrong. I'd suggest further that a lot of people are disillusioned by religion for precisely these black and white ideas. I think a lot of people, when they think about Christianity, think about a battle between light and dark, between good and evil, a binary religion where there's followers of Jesus and everybody else. I think not only do people not agree with that, I think that doesn't resonate anymore with the lives that we're living. Each one of our lives is getting more chaotic by the day. And honestly, when I talk to people who are new grandparents, for example, who have their lives infinitely more chaotic than they were before, we tend to embrace the chaos of life. As we encounter new cultures and love their food and their music, as we meet people we've never met before, we love the chaos of life and the chaos of love and the holy chaos that God brings into our life. We love it. We don't want the world to get more simple. We do not want to subdue the riot of life into one worldview anymore. We don't want to be a nation that conquers other nations to make them more like us. We don't want to live in that world. And we think that world is a dark place. And I don't think that's the world that God is calling us to embrace. The gospel this morning is about Jesus, surrounded by chaos and asleep, at peace on the roiling seas of the earth, embracing life. I believe we're called to do the same, to embrace all the chaos of this world, to name it, and to find ways of embracing the chaos of life and of love, like a prism that takes a beam of light and splits it into myriad colors. Amen.